Freakier Friday is at last available on Disney Plus in the UK, and I watched it immediately. And I'm pleased to say it was not too bad. There are some things that I think could have been not necessarily better, but I was expecting a certain direction and it didn't happen. And I can understand with the switches why they took that journey, but I just feel like it would have been stronger if it had been slightly different. But I'll talk more about that in a moment. My perspective is that I am a fan of Freaky Friday, but I'm not somebody who's seen it many, many times over. It's not a very nostalgic film for me. That being said, it is the only film I have ever seen more than once in the cinema. The only one. I don't know why I saw it at least twice, maybe 3 times. I think just different friends wanted to see it at different times. So the only film I've seen twice in the cinema is Freaky Friday, which is pretty awesome. I do really like the film, but I didn't go in with specific expectations. I wasn't hoping for this character development. I wasn't really looking to see this. So I know that some people really, really love the film and they'll have very different expectations to me. So that's just worth bearing in mind. But nevertheless, as I said, it is still a really solid film. And this was released this year, of course, in 2025. It's directed by Nisha Ganatra and written by Jordan Weiss, with a cast including, of course, Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan. We also have Julia Butters and Sophia Hammons as Harper and Lily. And Harper is Anna's daughter, and she is forced to be stepsisters with Lily after Anna becomes engaged to Lily's father. And then there's a palm reading and an earthquake, and this is when the switch happens. I'd say, okay, so we needed time to catch the viewer up with what had happened in the decades that have passed since the first film, but I do think it took a little longer than I would have liked to get to the earthquake, which of course triggers the switch. But once we got there, it was interesting. But this is also the bit where I feel like a different direction would have been more beneficial. But I can kind of understand why they took the direction they did, because the switch involves, well, 4 people this time. They are cranking it up a notch, which I do think was a really good idea. However, it did take a bit of brain power to remember for a little bit which character was now in which body. It took it a little bit of time to get used to that, but it wasn't complicated or anything. And Anna and Harper switch. So Anna swaps with her daughter, and Tess and Lily also switch. And I'm going to contradict myself, because on the one hand, I don't think that was the right choice. But on the other, I think it's the funnier choice. So I think it would have been more moving, meaningful, and important if Harper and Lily had swapped, because they're not getting along very well. Usually with Freaky Friday, it's the classic walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, and yes, of course, that is happening. But I think it would have been a much more powerful story if they had swapped, because then they would have been able to see things from each other's perspective, and it would have been, I think, in my opinion, more important. However, as I said, I think it's funnier with their decision, because, and something that happens with, I think, pretty much every Freaky Friday that I've seen, there are quite a few of them, it's always a child and an adult swapping bodies. And obviously that gives us a lot of funny things, because an adult is in a child's body generations later when things are really different. And of course, a child living in an adult's world is always entertaining. So I think it's the funnier decision. So I don't think they made a bad decision necessarily. But if they wanted a more powerful story, in my opinion, I think it would have been better if Lily and Harper had swapped. But obviously we do get some benefits. Mother and daughter swapping, and then Lily and, of course, Tess swapping. I feel like there are still lessons to be learned, opportunities to see things from other people's perspective. So it's not completely lost. And again, I am contradicting myself by saying I quite like the decision because it is funnier. But I think it could have been a stronger story had it been Harper and Lily. That aside, I think the film is brilliant. Once the swap happens, it is great fun. There are a lot of great opportunities for learning, of course, and a lot of different situations the characters find themselves in. It becomes very chaotic, pretty much from the swap. Obviously, when they wake up, they realise what's happened. And because Tess and Anna have been through this before, they have a bit more understanding of what's happened and what they have to do to play this out. And from that point on, it does become a very busy film. Obviously, when we have 4 characters, each with, I'd say, pretty weighted screen time. I don't know if they had exactly the same amount of time, but I do feel like the focus was pretty weighted. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of emotions. And for the most part, As I said, it took a little bit of time to get used to which character was in which body, but for the most part, it's not overcomplicated, it's not too busy. I think they found quite a nice balance with making it engaging, easy enough to follow, while allowing us the time to focus on different characters and their experiences. I think the balance there was pretty effectively done, but still being quite chaotic and generally quite good fun. And we do have gorgeous visuals. It's really beautiful to look at. The music is brilliant. And I won't say too much about Tess and Anna and where they are, I guess, on their own journeys at this point. I don't want to spoil too much, but I will say that I believed where they were. I believed their relationship. It felt like the same characters. I don't think that there were any significant differences that made it feel like I was watching different characters or anything. So in terms of the character writing, and also for Harper and Lily and the other characters as well, absolutely fine. Obviously, really brilliant performances, and it's a really enjoyable film. The technical aspects are all well done. The narrative is it's a lot. It's a very busy narrative, but not as a criticism. It works very well. I think they did a really good job with it. As I said, for me personally, a little slow at the beginning, and as I said as well, I also think, in my opinion, it could have been a bit of a stronger story if Harper and Lily had swapped. But again, it's funnier when children and adults swap, so I can understand that decision, and I don't necessarily think it was a bad decision. Again, I know I'm contradicting myself. And it's not as good as the first film, but the first film is brilliant. And I say that as somebody who isn't very nostalgic for that film, despite the fact I saw it twice in the cinema. So I don't have specific expectations with this. As I said, I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just looking for a good film, a good story, entertainment, some good messages, great characters. It delivered on every count, and I'd say it's a really solid film. And if it's at all possible, I'd quite like to see another version in 20 years. I hope they don't do what a lot of films do. And if this has been announced, by all means tell me, but a lot of films will do a reboot 20 years later, 30 years later, and the reboot, or the sequel rather, will be successful because people have been waiting decades for it. And they think, oh, well, this is successful, so we must immediately do a third film. And they do a third film back to back, not realising that the reason the sequel was successful is because people have waited so long for it. It's nostalgic. It's been a beautiful journey. A third film is unlikely to do just as well. So I really hope they don't do another one anytime soon. But I would quite like to see another one at a reasonable time in the future. But whether or not that happens, who knows? Freakier Friday has been obviously a long time coming. And I'd say it was absolutely worth the wait. It's a really solid film, and if you liked the first film, then without question, I'd say this is one that's certainly worth watching.